So sugar is everywhere. I don't think I needed to tell you that. Even though sugar consumption has been coming down over the past 2 to 3 decades, we're still nowhere near where we need to be with how much sugar we're taking in. People are taking in more than 50 to 100 grams of sugar a day of artificial added sugars. In fact, the American Pediatric Association has recommended that children not take in more than 25 grams a day of added sugar, which is still a lot, because for you to help you visualize how much 25 grams of sugar is, you divide that number by 4. So that's roughly 6 teaspoons of sugar. Look, would you give your kids 6 teaspoons of sugar in a day? I don't think so, but many of us adults are actually doing far more than that. So candy and all the things that kids get attracted to, this is how we celebrate. This is how we reward good behavior. You know, at school, my kids come home with candy at least once or twice a week, even though I keep saying, can we not do this? Cereals and, you know, these box packaged products full of sugar. Every time I pick up a cereal box, I go right to carbs and added sugars. It's really hard to find a cereal with less than 30 grams of sugar in a serving. So something to be aware of. I know orange juice is healthy and delicious. We think of it as something healthy, but look at what we've done to an orange. An orange is a whole food. You know, it's got all the fiber in it. And when we juice it, we take out all the fiber, which means that the liquid left behind becomes very sugary. So, you know, avoiding juice is probably a good idea. And you know, sticking to other liquids is really helpful. Really, the only drink in our house is water and maybe kombucha. Let's see here. Okay, so let's say you go out to a restaurant and maybe you order some Chinese food. Chinese food in the US is nothing like Chinese food in China. It's very sugary. It is not nearly the same thing. So there's something about our way of eating here where we entice people with sugar. Sauces and things like that line grocery stores full of sugar. Just turn the labels over and start reading. A certain coffee chain that makes very high calorie liquid sugar drinks. And many of these are being consumed by young people. I used to take the train to work, and kids would be on the train, like junior high, high school kids, with a giant sugary drink of coffee. So a lot of us are drinking our sugar. And of course, when you go to the dairy section in the grocery store, you might see words like light, low fat, but what you need to look at is what's on the label. How did they make it taste good if they took out all the fat? Right? So a lot of times they're adding sugar back in. And even something like bread that you wouldn't think about as being a processed product with a lot of sugar in it, turn over your bread label and read the ingredients. If you can get through that list of words that are impossible to pronounce, oftentimes one of the first few ingredients is something that is a sugar. So not all carbs are created equal. There are some good carbs, and I want to have a balanced discussion. So let's talk about natural versus artificial sugars. So fruit contains fructose and some other simple sugars. These are natural sugars. They're small molecules, which is problematic because they're easy to break down, which means you get a big spike in blood sugar. But there are some other good things in this strawberry, like, you know, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, fiber that buffers that. And then there's your artificial sugars, high fructose corn syrup. Now, these are the things you really want to stay away from. So whenever given the choice, pick the natural sugar. So we kind of have this running joke at our house, like once in a while, my kids will get a Coke, and my kids will always say, well, we'll take the Mexican Coke because it has cane sugar in it versus the American one that oftentimes has high fructose corn syrup. I'd rather you just have natural sugar. And then when we talk about carbs, we talk about simple versus complex. So simple means small molecules, easy to break down, rapid increase in blood sugar, which is not good. So this could be like table sugar here versus carbs here in a bowl of nuts and seeds. These are complex carbs. These are big molecules. They're hard to break down. And that means they don't lead to a big spike in blood sugar, which is a good thing. Okay, so how does sugar manipulate us and our different body systems? Well, first of all, it hits just the right spots in the brain. There are areas that are the reward areas of the brain, and dopamine is released. So when we consume sugar, dopamine is released, which makes us go back and do that same behavior that released the dopamine, and then more dopamine is released. Interestingly enough, also, when we consume sugar, opioid receptors are also turned on. So this is why we feel good when we eat sugar, right? Except that the feeling is pretty temporary. Our taste buds are hijacked. So we lose our interest in the taste of natural foods, and we start looking for these very extreme taste profiles with lots and lots of sugar, artificial fats. I mean, there's, a reason to why, different packaged products are produced the way they are, because they test these out on consumers to see what causes people to consume more of these artificial foods. So when you have a lot of sugar in your diet, your taste buds kind of lose their sensitivity for natural foods. Fortunately, you can retrain them. Leaky gut. This is something that we'll talk about in a future webinar, but eating a lot of sugar actually causes changes in the types of friendly bugs and non-friendly bugs that grow and thrive in your large intestine, the gut microbiome. And not only do the good bugs maybe kind of diminish in number, but you can actually get leaky gut, which is a state where the lining of your GI tract is not so intact. It's porous, things can leak out, and unwanted things can get into the body. And this is really one of the foundational strategies to improving our immune health, is to get our gut health in order. And treating leaky gut is super important. Cutting out sugar helps repair leaky gut. Every time you eat sugar, your pancreas, so that the insulin can go and pull sugar out of the blood and into our cells. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, even if you don't have diabetes, you're going to keep sort of whipping your pancreas and stressing it out, because every time sugar comes in, it's going to have to put insulin out there. And there's a lot of other downstream effects to insulin getting secreted. So when insulin goes up, the next thing that it does is cortisol goes up. Cortisol is a hormone that is secreted from the adrenal glands. There's an adrenal gland on top of each kidney, and its job is to produce many hormones, cortisol being one of them. So basically the way it works is you consume sugar, your pancreas puts out insulin. When insulin goes up, cortisol goes up. Here's something most people don't know. When cortisol is up, thyroid is suppressed. Right? So if you have a thyroid issue, one of the best things you could do is cut out sugar so that this cycle doesn't happen. Okay. And let's think about some other ways that sugar derails our bodies. So when we eat a lot of sugar, there's dehydration that can happen. It just naturally, you'll lose fluid because of all the sugar that's in the bloodstream. There's many different ways that inflammation can get incited because of sugar. There are various biochemical pathways that are turned on as a result. And this is actually really important for MS. I actually put a paper that I found talking about advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. Basically, what you need to know about this is when sugar in our diet interacts with proteins or fats in our body, you can develop these AGEs that can be very inflammatory. So again, if you remove the sugar, you'll have less AGEs. Okay. Sugar can actually cause pain. I've had patients who are on a ton of Motrin and Tylenol and even opioids for pain, for joint pain. And when they do an elimination diet and cut out sugar, their pain goes away. So this is a perfect illustration of how Western medicine treats pain. Okay, you have pain, we're going to give you pain medicine, but there's no investigation as to why there's pain. And sometimes you don't need to be on all those medications. You just need to look at the underlying cause. And one of the things I'm always pushing on is, how do you really get to things at the root cause level. So I'm always pushing to say, like, how do we go upstream? Yes, there's pain because there's inflammation. Why is there inflammation? Maybe because there's a lot of sugar in the diet. When we eat a lot of sugar, infections tend to happen. So bacteria and yeast thrive on sugar. So it's basically like you're just providing their food source. So if you want to get rid of these recurrent infections, especially yeast infections, you got to cut off their food source. So cut out the sugar. Sugar drives heart disease, which actually is important in an autoimmune condition like MS because there's a lot of inflammation in blood vessels. Sugar actually leads to anxiety and depression, so it can definitely impact mood. It can worsen fatigue and brain fog. And, I know a lot of us with fatigue may rely on sugar for that burst of energy, but there's always a crash afterwards, and it's not the long-term solution. And finally, we talked about leaky gut.